Hey YouTube, so let's talk about Yugioh. And today I want to talk about Metal Yangzing or Yangzing versus Demise Yangzing. So, after the past couple of weeks of locals, I have been really struggling with this deck. Almost everybody is citing Effect Veiler, Ghost Ogre, Maxi, Winter Cherries, and Baxia, or Denglong, or sorry, not Denglong, Chaofeng, or whatever. And I've been having a lot of issues, a lot of salt built up. I have a lot of excess sodium in my system just because game one it's usually fine, but game two, game three can be a real struggle when it comes to this deck. And this deck just loses so much to hand traps, especially when they're so splashable in this format. So I remembered a video that I saw a while back by a YouTuber of the name Pirate Radio, who does a lot of Yangzing videos. One of the videos he did was called The Demise of Denglong, and I tried it out on Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro against some of my friends just using proxies and stuff, and this is kind of how it went.
I got a doctor's checkup about 6 months ago. They told me your triglycerides are dangerously high, your bad cholesterol, all the markers, okay, you have barely any testosterone whatsoever. You have about 100, maybe 80 nanograms per decibel there. I was fucked up, okay? I was fucked up. I was fucked up. Went in and I said, hey doc, my dick doesn't work, I get winded climbing half a flight of stairs, I'm in trouble. I got tits. He said, there's a secret blog you can go on and you can find a recipe for some super duper healthy tea. And of course I customized that recipe myself. Once I learned of the properties of the super duper tea and used my brain power to customize this tea to my own specifications. Came back. I went back to the doctor about 4 months later. He took my blood test. He looked at me dead in the face. He said, oh, wow! It's like you're 18 again. So, here we go.
So yeah, the deck actually ended up turning out really good. I had a lot of fun with this deck while I was playing it online. And yes, while the Demise style of playing can be a little bit what some players would call cancerous, it's actually a lot of fun because not only are you just psalm striking and negating things with 9 branches, but you're also synchroning on your opponent's turn. It's a deck that takes a lot of skill to play because you need to know, okay, well, is it best to go into what resource here? You need to know how timings work, especially with Baxia in this deck, because you're making it primarily on your opponent's turn. And you need to know your matchups a lot better than you would in any other deck. So without further ado, let's start to talk about the pros and cons of each deck. So I know my videos are usually long, so I'll try to make this pretty short. So let's talk about Metalfo Yangzing. So some pros about Metalfo Yangzing is they can make huge boards, and on top of that, that's a 6 negates board most of the time, especially when Denglong and 9 branches comes out. There is versatility in the extra deck to play on your opponent's turn, although it's not very likely. And if you resolve combo, you basically win the game, which can be really powerful. Some of the cons is that it is a 40 to 60% nuts rate. While that is and slash can be a little bit higher than a 50%, which means you have a little bit of a higher chance than 1/2, you're still not going to be able to get it off enough to be able to win tournaments or to even top, depending on how competitive your locals is. Mine personally, I don't think I could ever win a tournament with Yangzing, just because it's so inconsistent. This deck loses to hand traps, I've already talked about that. You can side deck, but it does require you to get nuts in order for your side decks to be effective. There is little to no board disruption. While you can make synchros on your opponent's turn, It can sometimes be a little bit awkward to make synchros just because you can only usually make them with 2 monsters. If you do resolve nuts, then your board space is usually filled up to about the max, and if you didn't resolve nuts, then you probably can't do anything. And then the last con is that if you don't win the dice roll, you probably won't be winning the match, which really, really sucks. But it's just kind of the nature of the deck. While you can win going second, it's not very likely just because Blue Eyes can pop out Spirit Dragon, and Infernoids can banish cards from grave, which can actually be pretty devastating if you synchro for Baxia and then they destroy your jiatou, or they banish your jiatou from graveyard. Other decks can get rid of cards with similar, if not just as much ease. So, some pros to the Demise deck. So, you don't have to necessarily keep an empty hand because you're not going into Void Ogre that much. You don't really need to keep your hand empty, and therefore you can have resources in hand that you don't have to have on field, which can likely be affected by opponent's card effects. You have an 80% nuts rate. This includes hands that can usually either make Danglong open with 1 or 2 negations, or just allow you to live for another turn. You have some pretty good side options. Because this is a trap deck and a lot of side deck cards are traps, you can easily swap out stuff like Quaking Mirror Forces and maybe a Pot of Duality in order for cards like Imperial Iron Wall, Pendulum Hole, Anti-Spell Fragrance, stuff like that. Maybe some like cool cards like Stygian Dirge or whatnot, even though I believe it'll hurt yourself. This deck doesn't lose to hand traps. Since all you're doing is really acting on your opponent's turn, they can't effect Veiler you because it's not during your own main phase, and because it's during theirs. So while this still can lose to Winter Cherry, you do have the option of making Omega to shuffle cards back in, and while that can be a little bit unlikely, stuff like Ghost Ogre and other hand traps like Max C don't really affect you. The other thing about this deck is it is super, super disruptive. You are totally clearing your opponent's board probably on your turn. There are cards like the Crystron Synchro that just blow up your opponent's entire back row, which can be hard to pull off in this deck, but if you can, 9 out of 10 times you'll win the game against back row decks. The cons are you don't get to do any gigantic combos. About the biggest combo you have in the deck is turn 1 Crystal Wing if you have jiatou and 2 other Yangzings. Another con is that your opponent has to destroy your own cards sometimes. So in order to start your summoning, your opponent usually has to destroy one of your own cards. Now, if you don't have a 9 branches, you can go ahead and set the cards so they don't know what you're playing unless you've gone ahead and played that opponent before. The other part that is a con technically, but can be evaded, is knowing your timings. So Yangzings miss timing very, very easily. And because they miss timing, it can sometimes be very, very difficult in order to think through what's happening so that you know when to resolve certain effects. Stuff like if Danglong can miss timing, if Baxia's effect on summon can miss timing, certain cards like that. So, did you enjoy that video? If you had a good time, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more. If you have any thoughts about other cool Yangzing decks that aren't Metalfo Yangzing or Demise Yangzing, or maybe cool techs in either one of those decks, or just generally want to discuss the deck, go ahead and leave some in the comments. And thanks for watching. Sorry about the lack of content lately, but college. And I'm thinking about maybe doing a Q&A soon once I get enough questions amassed. So for a while, I probably won't be answering questions in the comments. But go ahead and ask me a question if you want to. I'll answer 9 out of 10 things, and I could probably make a video on that. Other than that, as far as upcoming stuff, I've got a couple duel videos recorded with my friends. If not just me playing friends with Yangzing decks, but playing other decks as well, like some cool like Tolkien Hero variants or I think I played Necros in one of those videos, and just some other cool real life duel videos, which I hopefully will be fun to watch. If you want to help decide what video comes next, go ahead and click this survey screen. You know, it says survey on it. You click it, it'll take you to a Google form, and you can vote for which video you want to see next. Thanks for watching.